just yet. Don't group in service uniforms stands outside a wooden door. She's loved.
And you're between Robert there. By Nicholas, followed by Thangam, followed by Carla, Kellie-Jay, Samuel.
Or a being.
First in the alphabet.
What do you mean?
So, and this is to draw the final order of the addresses. So we've got numbers.
Thank you. Oh. Reverse.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh dear.
Sorry.
Coming right back.
Okay.
So a bit of a full start there. Thank you everyone so much for coming to this event from Bristol 24/7 in partnership with the Bristol Beacon, who I just want to extend a huge thank you for allowing us to hold these hustings here in the beautiful Lantern Hall. And also a big hello to those of you watching via the live stream. We'll be live captioned both here in the hall and on the live stream. So my name is Martin Booth. I'm the editor of Bristol 24/7, which is celebrating 10 years of independent journalism this year. Please do support in... Oh. Thanks, Mum. Please do support independent journalism and get a few great perks along the way by becoming a member of Bristol 24/7 for just £5 per month. Tonight, we have invited all 6 candidates whose names will be on the ballot paper on Thursday in Bristol Central. So now they should come out of that door. So without further ado, let's please welcome the candidates. We've got Nicholas Coombes from the Liberal Democrats. We've got Kellie-Jay from the Party of Women. Robert Clarke, Reform UK. Samuel Williams, Conservative. Thangam Debbonaire, Labour Party. And Carla from the Green Party. Okay, let's all take a seat, guys. So thank you so much for...
Do I not get a table?
I think...
No.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. So just as a bit of background, Electoral Commission guidelines say that as this is a public hustings, it needs to be open to all registered candidates in the constituency for the forthcoming general election. So the Electoral Commission provide clear guidance on this, and it is advised that a non-selective hustings, like this one, must include an invitation to all candidates. So as mentioned, the guidance and protocols for hustings are very specific. And I just want to stress that neither Bristol 24/7 nor Bristol Beacon wish to platform or promote any one particular view. We want this to be a robust democratic debate. So in a moment, each of the candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening address. They'll also have 2 minutes for a closing address. And in between, candidates will be answering questions with a maximum of 1 minute per answer. They'll also have the opportunity to debate between themselves, but I must ask candidates for this to be kept as civil as possible, please. So the audience will be asking questions from you in the audience, some of which have been submitted in advance, and I'll be asking questions myself. So enough from me. I'll use alphabetical order by surname for the candidates' opening addresses, and we've also just drawn lots for the closing address order. So first up, Robert Clarke from Reform UK, please.
Thank you, Martin. Well, can you hear me? Yes. Well, we have 2 choices: democratic national sovereignty or fascist global governance. This is where we are at. The mainstream parties are embracing global governance. For example, Starmer, a member of the Trilateral Commission for 30 years, and behind Starmer's throne, Tony Blair and his Institute for Global Change. The Greens, whose existence is based on a spurious premise that there is a climate crisis, heavily endorsing the UN's 17 sustainable climate goals, cooked up at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And to some of you, of course, that's heresy, but you are believers. By the way, just for the record, there is no climate change, and I can prove that to you. This is a uni-party system, both endorsing top-down globalist diktat to accomplish Agenda 2030. If you're enlightened, you would have heard of Agenda 2030. This is a subversion of our democracy. We do not accept that. Immigration. We have had roughly 1 million immigrants a year coming to our lands since Blair infamously said, "We will rub the people's noses in multiculturalism." Government projections show that 14 million more immigrants will arrive to this country over the next decade. 1.5 million arrived in 2022 alone. Do you think we can absorb that? Do you think we can sustain that? Immigration on this level is akin to hybrid warfare against our people and culture. We don't accept that. Thank you.
Nicholas, please.
Thank you. I'm Nicholas Coombes, the Liberal Democrat candidate for Bristol Central, and I'm going to set out the opposite policy platform. We are campaigning for a fair deal to restore the broken social contract between our state and its citizens. Health and social care are at the top of our manifesto. Liberal Democrats want everyone to get an urgent GP appointment in 24 hours and cancer treatment within 2 months. Alongside funding training and staff, we can save the NHS by investing in carers. We want to recognise the work that they do by increasing the wages and carers' allowance. If we support carers, we can introduce free personal care, like Lib Dems did in Scotland, and get people out of hospitals. Bristolians are, I think, progressive, internationalist, environmentalist. These are Liberal Democrat values. I campaigned to remain in the European Union. I expect a lot of you were with me on the marches to stop Brexit. Liberal Democrats want to put Britain on a path to rejoining the single market, to improve relations with our neighbours, boost trade and cut tariffs. We're fighting to clean up our environment and stop sewage dumping. I enjoy a bit of wild swimming, but you do have to think twice before getting in the River Avon. We would make water companies into public benefit companies and ban bonuses until the discharges and the leaks end. Climate change is the greatest threat to our planet. You know this, I know this, because my day job is working to build wind farms. We would continue to decarbonise the energy supply, started when the Liberal Democrats were in government, but since trashed by the Conservatives. Our target for Britain is net zero by 2045. Now, at this election, we're all trying to second-guess each other to work out the best way to get rid of a Conservative government. Across the southwest, the Lib Dems are the best tactical choice to beat the Tories. But here in Bristol, all of our MPs are Labour, with huge majorities. Liberal Democrats would introduce a proportional voting system to end the frustration of tactical voting and deliver representative government. So to sum up, the Liberal Democrats are bringing the fight to the Conservatives. We're campaigning to rejoin the European single market, to fight climate change and to reform our political system.
Thangam Debbonaire, please.
My name is Thangam Debbonaire, and for the last 9 years I've had the great honour of being your Member of Parliament. I'm now standing to be Labour's candidate on Thursday, and I've been the Shadow Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, and preparing for government. And I'm so proud of Bristol. I'm so proud to call it my home. I'm proud of our revolutionary energy. I'm proud of the way we challenge the status quo. And that's why I've campaigned alongside so many of you to bring back the number 25 bus, to restore NHS dentistry to St Paul's, to get a new school built in part of our city, which will open next year. But I don't want to fix this city's problems, bus by bus, dentist by dentist, school by school. This country, as well as this city, is crying out for change. And we can get that change if we have a change of government. It's a big deal to do that, and we know that Samuel here is not going to be elected as the MP on Thursday. However, the Tories are good at winning elections nationally, and across the country, my colleagues tell me that it is not a done deal. If you elect me as your MP again on Thursday, I will be at the heart of the Labour government, that Labour government that, as well as fixing our buses and bringing rail back into public ownership, is going to heal our NHS, put creativity back at the heart of every child's education, put mental health hubs in every school, put more police back on our streets, and sort out our climate crisis, which is of such clear and present danger. So if you want to elect a Labour government and be part of the change, vote Labour on Thursday. Thank you.
Carla.
Thank you. I'm Carla, co-leader of the Green Party of England and Wales, and your Green MP candidate here in Bristol Central. We know Labour is going to form the next government, but here in Bristol Central, you are in a unique position. If you want to see the Tories out of government, but you also want a strong, independent voice to speak up on the issues that matter to you, you can have both. By voting Green on the 4th of July, you can get that Green voice in Parliament whilst also waking up to a Labour government. We often hear how Starmer's Labour are offering change. I want you to think about what you've heard from him and his party, but also about your values and the things that are important to you. Those are things we shouldn't compromise on. Are his party offering the real change that you want to see? I'm here to tell you that we deserve better than a half-baked, unambitious, uninspiring compromise. And our children deserve better too. By electing a Green MP, you can kick the Tories out of government whilst saying yes to protecting the NHS from privatisation, keeping rents under control, a nationwide home insulation programme, compassion and humanity towards migrants, and a £15 minimum wage. I'm not afraid to say the things the other parties won't, that big corporations and the super rich should pay their fair share so that we can properly fund our public services and so that the people who work in them get the wages they deserve. As your MP, I will fight tooth and nail in Parliament to make the next Labour government think bigger and act bolder. We need Green MPs to hold Labour to account and push them in the right direction. Do you want to give Keir Starmer a blank cheque, a huge majority, with his only opposition in Westminster coming from the right of politics? Or would you rather have a few Green voices in Parliament standing up for your values? On the 4th of July, you're free to choose real hope and real change. Vote Green.
Kellie-Jay Keane.
My name is Kellie-Jay Keane. I am leader of Party of Women. We don't expect really to get many of your votes. I think the women have got it sewn up on the end of the stage. We exist because we're absolutely fed up of leaders in this country pretending they don't know what a woman is, pretending that they don't know that children are being indoctrinated into schools, into not accepting single-sex spaces, into not allowing elderly women to go into hospital and have care in her own home where she is served by single-sex care. This really isn't about convincing you to vote for me. This is about convincing Thangam, who I think will be your MP, to actually speak up for women, because she's been incredibly silent over the years, despite her history serving women in domestic violence and other women's services. So it's about saying, will you just speak up for women-only spaces? Will you speak up for girls in schools who are now not going to the loo all day because they're frightened of sharing their single-sex toilets with boys, or unisex toilets, which most schools in Bristol have and have had for quite some time. So this is really just about asking politicians who are supposed to be serving you to ensure that part of that is serving women and providing single-sex spaces and single-sex rights to both men and women. That's it.
Well done.
Samuel Williams.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Samuel Williams, and I'm the Conservative candidate. And thank you. I must thank Thangam for that sort of silken boxing mitt there. Thank you. I think she's right that people are ready for a change, and we've seen a lot of Labour for a long time. But we've also seen a lot of Conservative for a long time, and I'm not naive to not admit, rather, actually, that it's not been difficult for the last 14 years. But let's take a moment just to look back at what the Conservative government has done and celebrate some of the good. We see the Same-Sex Marriage Act. We see flexible working regulations. We see the Modern Slavery Act, National Living Wage, Gender Pay Gap Reporting, Data Protection Act, Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, the Environment Act, Skills and Post-16 Education Act, Equalities Act, cost of living support packages. We've seen since Cameron and his big society, local communities being empowered as they can to deliver local services in the local communities. We see May's devolution of power with regional mayors delivering policies at a regional level for our communities. We see even Johnson's levelling up agenda delivering billions to communities that have often been left behind. The Conservatives have and continue to be committed to our communities, and we've got to start by listening. If I am elected as your MP, I will start with listening and learning and representing you, because that's what it's about, isn't it? It's not just about accepting the status quo, the way we've always had it. We're ready for a change. We're ready for communities and a government that works for you. I believe that that is a Conservative government.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the candidates. We should have a couple of people from Bristol 24/7 with roving mics in the audience. So I'll go straight to a question, please. I think that Jules Davis from Curiosity Unlimited is in the audience. So Jules, if you could put your hand up, please. I see that Karen's given you a mic. Great. Fire away, Jules.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Welcome. My name is Jules. I am the Chief Disruptor for Curiosity Unlimited. We're a think and do tank for racial and social justice. I also would like to say that I'm a proud Northwest Indian, a proud son in the city, and also a son of an immigrant. And I'm proud to be here today representing. Bristol has been found to be the 7th worst out of 348 places in the UK for racial inequality. That's a report by the Runnymede Trust. If elected, what would you and your party do to dramatically increase racial equality and reduce systematic inequality in Bristol so that it becomes a UK beacon as the best place for people of all colours, cultures and class to live?
Thanks, Jules. Jules in Curiosity Unlimited are putting on some absolutely amazing things at the moment in the Beacon and across the city. So well done for everything you're doing, Jules. Can we work from Carla in this direction, please? So, so just to remind candidates, 1 minute maximum per answer, please. Carla.
Thank you, Jules. Your question referencing the Runnymede Trust reminded me of a statistic I read recently, also from them, which said that you were, I think it was 17 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you're black. So one of the things I will certainly do if I'm elected by Bristol Central as your MP will be to push hard for the stop of routine use of stop and search, because the way it is used at the moment is clearly racist. In terms of approaches in Bristol especially, you'll be aware that the Greens recently got elected to lead Bristol City Council, and my local colleagues are really driven to tackle inequalities in the city. You may be aware that my colleague Mohammed Makawi led a motion just before the election about knife crime, which is something that also affects black communities far too much. And I thought his motion was really good because it recognised that there is no silver bullet to this issue, and it's certainly not about more policing and harsher policing. It's about things like making sure that the council is providing well-funded youth services so that it's giving young people somewhere safe to be, a constructive environment to be in, giving them access to mental health support in schools, making sure that they are living in good quality accommodation, good quality housing. They've got somewhere safe, warm and healthy to live. And that'll be my approach nationally as well, because so many of these issues are caused ultimately by inequality, by unequal access to good quality work, housing, education, and so on.
Thangam, Debbonaire.
Well, Jules, as you know, we recently celebrated together by bringing the Bristol bus boycotters, those elders who are still with us and some of their families, to Parliament to celebrate the anniversary of the Bristol bus boycott and all it achieved. And I was really proud to take these elders, my neighbours and friends from St Paul's and beyond, round Parliament to meet some of the politicians that they had once worked with in those days in the 60s when inequality wasn't even against the law. What they did led to Britain's first Race Equality Act, helped by Tony Benn. And they were so pleased when Tony Benn's son, Hillary, was able to come and talk to them. But I know that what they appreciated even more was hearing from Keir Starmer about the Race Equality Act that we will bring in the first few years of a Labour government, which is so badly needed, with racial pay gap auditing, with so much more that we need to do. And when I met recently on Windrush Day with the elders again, one of the things we talked about is our sadness as well as our joy in their achievements, but our sadness that there is still so much to do. I will work with all our communities, as I have done ever since I've become MP, to celebrate when we get closer to equality, but also never to be afraid to hold anyone and everyone to account for continued racial injustice and inequality. I worked hard to protect and support Windrush victims. I was the first MP in the country to hold a Windrush surgery, inviting Home Office officials and others to come and help my constituents. I was backing and I helped so many Windrush victims to get the compensation they were owed. But it's not enough. We've more to do. And with a Labour government, which we can elect on Thursday, and with me in it, we can champion the cause of race equality until we get to true equality. And I thank you for your question.
Samuel Williams, please.
Thank you. I celebrate what Thangam just said there. Actually, I think I agree with a lot and celebrate a lot of the aspirations around Labour in this regard. I really do. And it's a really important thing that we stand together in that regard. My father came here from Jamaica, my grandmother came here, my great-grandmother during the Windrush. This is something that's very meaningful to me. And I hate to do it, Carla, but I'm horrified that, you know, knife crime and stop and search are not the only issues that people of minoritized groups care about. Like, come on. We need to deliver education that is accepting and equal and fair. We need to deliver jobs. We need to ensure that there is less discrimination in our streets and our employment practices. We need to ensure that we stand up and act. And I'm sorry to point the finger to Marvin when he was in power as mayor, but he did not act soon enough around the Colston statue. People have been talking and raising that for many, many years. We need bold action to be brave, to see and recognise where there is discrimination in our society and stand up and celebrate it. Let us celebrate, as Bristol Central, our diversity. It is one of our strongest assets, and I stand up and celebrate that enormously. I'm also saddened when, as the Conservative Party, we have not done enough, because that's absolutely true. It's absolutely true of all political parties, and we should be the ones who make the difference here in Bristol. We're pioneers, we're innovators, and we celebrate diversity, and we must do that.
Robert Clarke.
Thank you. Well, Bristol is a great city, and one of the things that makes it exciting is all the different communities in this town, and you can easily cross between these communities. Now, one of the first things to say about equality is not as important as freedom. So I'd like to just get this point across that freedom for all of us is something we're going to really have to work towards in light of some of the things I said in my introduction. One of the other things that is important to say here is that work is the key to almost everything in society. If you get people working, so it doesn't really matter if you're from an immigrant background or whether you come from Hartcliffe, there's a lot of social dysfunction because people simply don't have work, and the devil makes idle work for idle hands to do. So we really need to provide work for people and get them working so they can get a wage, they can possibly get themselves on the housing ladder. Then they can have a family which is desirable, and then they can make their way in society as they grow up into adults. The final thing I'd like to say about this subject, as has been mentioned, there was a boy who was stabbed outside of McDonald's or inside the other day. There is a plethora of stabbings in Bristol. What we don't need is something like critical race theory taught in our schools or discussed even that much. What we have to do is live together and act together as a one community, and that needs to be encouraged. So the divide and rule agenda should not be even thought of and not employed, but you do see that coming through our system. Thank you.
Kellie-Jay Keane.
So the issue that my party focuses on is the Gender Recognition Act and being able to be honest in public debates, which I don't know if you noticed my fans that were gathered outside, but they do try and stop me speaking wherever I go. I can't hire venues, for example. And some of the women that come and talk at my events are women that are Muslim, that wear hijabs, that now fear going into public spaces to adjust their hijabs or working in council buildings when they no longer have access to single-sex spaces. So in that regard, this specific issue that I look at can impact different cultures in different ways. And I'd just like to raise it because often we are accused, when we talk about single-sex spaces and the things that I defend, we are accused of actually ignoring races or being racist on the basis that we talk about these issues. It's a frequent accusation to try and shut women up. And I just want to say there is nothing more racist than pretending that women who have certain sensibilities should not have access to single-sex spaces, which means they might miss doctor's appointments. You often have medical literature calling women cervix havers or birthing persons. And women who speak English as a second language, they have no idea what you're talking about when they say cervix havers. They need clear and accurate language so they can access the sort of services that some of us take for granted. So that's what I'd like to say about racial inequality.
And Nicholas, please.
Thank you. I will talk a little more about racial inequality, but it is important to recognise the intersectionality of it, that people of black and ethnic minority backgrounds who also happen to be women or younger or older or happen to be gay or trans will experience these inequalities in different ways, and it can reinforce. So looking across the entire picture, what the Liberal Democrats want to do is to develop and implement a race equality strategy that looks at the issues like education, health, crime, and the economy, because inequality correlates, that you often find that one thing follows another. So I'll just give you a couple of the examples from our manifesto around reducing this inequality. In education, for example, when the Liberal Democrats were in government, they started with the pupil premium to channel resources to pupils from poorer backgrounds. And what we would like to do next is continue by expanding free school meals so that all children in poverty get something to eat at school. At health, I've talked about ensuring that you see a GP within 24 hours for urgent treatment, within a week for a less urgent case, and a cancer referral within 2 months. This is something which sometimes does impact people of different races unequally. And we want to fund carers with an increase in pay so that people can be looked after at home. In terms of housing, we think that we need at least 150,000 new social homes each year to be built. And in the private sector, we want a ban on no-fault eviction and 3-year tenancies as a default. For benefits, we want to scrap the benefits cap and the 2-child limit. So I think I'm out of time, but I just want to say that reducing inequality allows everyone to flourish, irrespective of your race or background.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you, candidates, for mostly sticking to the 1 minute limit. It's going to be a bit tricky because we haven't got a lot of time. So if I can just stress, if we can have a minute, I don't really want to butt in, but I'm going to have to take a hard line if possible. So we are sitting here in the Bristol Beacon. I want to ask a question on behalf of...
Martin, sorry, I don't know if you were going to allow any discussion of that, but as I was directly addressed by one of the other panellists,
Of course,
I'd like
sorry,
to come
Carla,
back on that at least.
I got ahead of myself. Would you both like to...
You can go first.
No, you fine, you call first.
Okay. Well, since Samuel addressed me directly, I thought I should pick up on that. Of course, knife crime and stop and search aren't the only issues affecting communities of colour, but they are issues that are brought up with me by people of colour on the doorstep frequently. When I met with a group of Somali women a few weeks ago, it was community safety, it was specifically referencing knife crime and housing that were the two issues that came up again and again, and in particular the shortage of affordable housing and social housing in good quality in this city came up again and again. And many of you will have heard me say already, I've been a housing campaigner my whole political life, and making sure that we enable and fund councils to build enough social housing to meet people's needs was already one of my priorities, but doubly so after meeting with them. I wanted to say thank you, Thangam, for reminding us about the importance of celebrating successes and celebrating the contribution of people of colour, as well as focusing on the issues, which reminded me that the Green Party has for a little while now campaigned to make Windrush Day a public holiday, because it is important to recognise that contribution. We would require companies to do pay gap reporting on racial pay gaps as well as gender pay gaps.
Is this within the minute?
And I don't know. What was the time for the... Oh, well, anyway. And to tackle the hostile environment for migrants.
I think if you want to tackle racial inequality, particularly when it comes to the example Carla just gave about race pay gaps, electing a Labour government is a concrete way to do it, because we actually will be able to put into practice a law, a Race Equality Act for the mid-21st century that will actually do that. Now, I don't have to be reminded about racial inequality. As the first woman of colour ever to have been elected in the entire South West, I am proud that in my late 40s I decided... that I wanted to be part of reflecting the city we are. My dad, who came over on the boat from what was then Madras in the 50s, would have been so proud to see me achieve this. He was proud of being British, but he was proud of his Indian heritage. So many of us are. We know who we are. We know that the statue needed to come down. I called for it years ago. And I'm so proud of the way Bristol did this by turning it into a work of art in the museum. That's how we do things in Bristol. We tell a new story and we do it with flair and passion. And that's what we're going to do. If we elect a new government on Thursday, we can tell a new story together.
So, I'll just make one comment on all of this, and there is only one race, the human race. So let's not create too much division.
Okay, thanks everybody. So, Carla, thanks for reminding me that we were going to have a bit of a debate, so thanks for that. I got a bit carried away with talking about the wonderful space that we find ourselves in. So this next question is from Estella Tinknell, who's an associate professor in film and culture at UWE. So she said that Bristol has a very successful media and cultural economy that not only employs thousands of people, but it also contributes to the national profile and reputation of our city as a creative hub, and also makes Bristol a great place to live. So the question, what are the candidates' specific plans to ensure this economy thrives and Bristol sustains its creative vigour? Thangam, I'll start with you for this question, please.
So I've been Shadow Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, which also includes heritage, tourism, civil society and youth services, for some time now. And if I'm re-elected on Thursday and there is a Labour government, I will take my place as Secretary of State. One of my first priorities will be rebuilding the arts and culture and creative industry sector that has been so damaged by 14 years of Tory chaos. From cuts to the Arts Council grants over 10 years ago now, to cuts to local authorities, which has made it so difficult for our local arts scene as well as our national arts scene to thrive. So I'm glad you asked this question, Estella. And our TV and film companies are a really good example of a growth industry, something that can actually help our economy grow. And when our economy grows, and we want it to grow fairly around the country, when it grows, young people benefit from those great jobs in such careers of imagination. But the economy benefits, which is how we pay for things like hospitals and schools and repaving our roads and good transport. The creative industries are 1.5 times the growth rate of the economy as a whole. But they tell me, as Shadow Secretary of State, that they've struggled recently. They've had a difficult time. It's not just an art system where we have subsidised arts over here and private industries over here. There is a whole ecosystem. I prefer to use the term investment for whether it's in the publicly invested or the privately invested sector. Getting more funding back into those sectors, championing them. As a former musician and still happy amateur, this is in my DNA. It's who I am. And I'm proud of what we do as Bristolians. And I'll be prouder still when I can take what we've learnt in Bristol and apply it to the entire country, which will be my ambition as Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. Whether it's the Natural History Unit, which I've had such good cause to visit recently, or it's Boom Satsuma, who are locally doing such a brilliant job of training our young people and getting them into those great jobs. I will be so proud when I see what a Labour government can do to tell that new creative story across the country. Thank you, Stella.
Nicholas, please.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't know if I'll go on for quite that long. I was never a professional cellist. I do play some amateur piano, but I think this is the closest I'm going to get to the big stage at the Bristol Beacon. I want to talk about some of the structural things that the creative industries have struggled with over the last couple of years. Particularly a Brexit one is that our touring musicians can't get to the European Union for gigs like they used to. And so the Liberal Democrats, as you know, were opposed to Brexit at the time and want to rebuild relationships with the EU, re-enter into a single market. But in the meantime, we can look at restoring that cross-border cooperation for visas for travelling culture exports, so that our own domestic sector can get the experience and the gigs that they need abroad, and also we can appreciate the culture that comes in from Europe. While talking about allowing people into our sector, businesses in the creative, technological and indeed cultural sector have been held back by overly restrictive immigration policies. Sounds odd, we've got to the highest immigration in years, but we don't have a merits-based visa system that really allows specialists to come in and work in our country in the shortage areas, which is something that the Liberal Democrats want to tackle, as we don't have the whole immigration baggage behind us. And one more thing, while we're in Bristol, which is, would have been the home of Channel 4 News, is to say that we would retain the public sector broadcasting for the BBC, for Channel 4, for all of the other public sector services that have been under threat in recent years. They would definitely be protected by the Liberal Democrats.
Kellie-Jay, please.
So over the last few years, you will have noticed the television messaging and the arts have sent quite a message that may chime with many of you about how you feel about trans rights, if you want to call it that, or anti-women sentiments, as I'd probably call it. And what women tell me who come to Reformers Tree, where we do free speech events for women to speak about whatever they like, is that the arts is really, really dangerous for women. They can't get involved unless they absolutely repeat the same lines, which make no sense to most of us, that men can be women And if those women that come to Reformers Tree don't want to spew those lines, don't want to follow that agenda, there is no place for them in the arts. They are bullied out and they are silenced. You may have heard of a woman called Rosie Kay who had her own ballet company, basically stolen from her because she wouldn't go along with this. She wanted to put women in female roles, and her crime to exclude men from those roles meant that she was ousted from her own dance company. So it's a really sad state of affairs, and Ofcom are also captured with this quasi-religious cult, as are the BBC, which means it's really unfriendly for women, and lots of women are just leaving the arts in droves.
Robert Clarke, please.
Culture. Well, a lot of the best culture comes from the ground up, from the gutter, with no subsidy whatsoever. You think of the punk movement, for example. So, yeah, of course the arts need subsidy, but then you look at it, and it's a very bourgeois, politically correct crew that get the subsidies. I wouldn't say don't give them subsidies, but a lot of people are shut out from the entertainment, the film industry, because they're not saying the right thing. So it's come to the point where you have to say the right thing to get any funding. That's clearly not right. And just finally, if you look at some of the hip-hop crews around Bristol, none of them are getting subsidies. So do you think the Ronnie Size got subsidies? Do you think the Massive Attack got subsidies? Do you think the Idols got subsidies? No, they didn't. So let's appreciate where the real culture comes from. Thank you.
Samuel Williams.
Let the titters die a little. One of the last times I was in this room was when we hired the Beacon, when it was still the Colston Hall, to host TEDx Bristol, for which I was one of the organising team. Some of you may have attended. That, for me, was a real celebration of what Bristol creative industries can do, from film crews to musicians to presenters to all the backstage crew. It was an extraordinary event that showcased, for me, what Bristol can really do around profiling, creativity and dynamism. And it's true that there's not been enough funding into the creative industries. It's also true that we can unlock a lot more by investing in infrastructure so that people, performers and the like, can get to Bristol. And that's why it's so important why the Conservative government will be investing over 36 billion into road, rail and bus, so that creative industries can be serviced by creative acts.
Thanks, Samuel. And Carla, please.
Thank you. Arts and culture are so important to our enjoyment of life, our mental health and our well-being. And yet, cultural and heritage venues have been victim to savage government cuts over the last 14 years. So that's why the Greens would be pushing to give local authorities a specific ring-fence £5 billion boost over 5 years to help keep local museums, local theatres, small music venues, libraries, art galleries and so on open and thriving. And we're focusing on those grassroots and community venues because this is where the next generation of creatives hone their craft. Without small venues, we don't have the next generation of big names. And so aside from that funding, there are 4 main things we would do to support arts and culture locally. Firstly, we would exempt cultural events, including everything from theatre and museum tickets to gigs in local pubs, from paying VAT, recognising how much the culture sector has struggled during the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. We would also lower VAT for hospitality, since it has that such strong link to culture and it's part of what helps support our local tourism industry, for example. Third, we would protect the nighttime and culture economies through a review of planning regulations and giving local authorities the powers to ensure that there is space in every town and city for cultural life. And finally, we would ensure that British musicians have access to visa-free travel to the EU by negotiating, in the short term, a reciprocal arrangement, and in the longer term, working towards getting back to free movement.
Thangam, you wanted to say something?
Robert's given me an opportunity to talk about the connection between public investments and
good.
private success. Ronnie Size, a friend of mine, by the way, he benefited from youth services in an age when youth services actually existed. He was given opportunities as a young person. He's such a great Bristol story. He tells our story so brilliantly. And it's that creative ecology that we need to restore by putting creativity back at the heart of every child's education, by restoring youth services and the cuts that I'm afraid Samuel's government, the party of Samuel's governments, has contributed to over the last decade. We will restore that hope in creativity as a future for young people. I think it's important as well to say that it takes a government to renegotiate our trade agreement with the EU, and a Labour government I've been able to put at the heart of our ambitions for renegotiating the trade and cooperation agreement, visa-free touring for all creatives. Yes, musicians, that's dear to my heart, but other creatives too. It's so important that we're able to do that. That will be one of the things we try to negotiate as soon as possible. I think we can achieve this. And we can be part of that change as a creative city. We can be part of that change, but only if we vote for it. And that's why we need to vote Labour on Thursday.
Yeah. Samuel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's true what Thangam has just said, that actually if we're wanting to see some of these laudable things that we heard from Greens, well, it's not going to be a Green government that can deliver it. Unfortunately, I will say, of course, it will be a Conservative government that will deliver it, but it won't be a Green government. Perhaps I'll leave it at that. But it's also important just to stress that it can also be private investment to deliver public good.
Agreed.
You mentioned Boom Satsuma, of course, a recipient of investment from Bristol and Bath Regional Capital, which has leveraged private capital to deliver significant public good across Bristol. Again, a really good celebratory story for us here in Bristol around how we leverage private capital to deliver public good.
And one of the examples that if I am Secretary of State for Culture, I will be taking to the national stage. It's a really good example of bringing public and private and social investment together to create a greater good.
Very good.
Carla,
So I'd just like to say...
Sorry, Robert.
Okay.
Carla.
Yeah, of course, I'm realistic. I'm not going to have the keys to number 10 on Friday morning, alas. And that's okay, you know. We recognise that the Green Party is a small, albeit rapidly growing party. Our goal in this election is to get a handful of Green MPs elected to pull the incoming Labour government in the right direction. Yes, that does mean I won't be able to deliver our full policy platform, but it means that we can be there as Greens in the room, pushing them to be braver and bolder on the areas they're not prepared to. We were talking about freedom of movement just a moment ago. Keir Starmer has categorically ruled out freedom of movement with the EU and any possibility of rejoining the EU. On the other hand, the Green Party are clear that the UK was better off in the EU, better for musicians and touring creatives, better for our local economies, better for the prospects for our young people. And that is a direction we think, ultimately, it's not going to happen immediately, but ultimately is a direction that will be better for the people of Bristol and the UK. And we will be those voices in the House of Commons being a positive influence on the incoming Labour government, pushing them to be braver and bolder.
Yeah, I would just...
Sorry, Robert, we're going to have to move on to
I just
the
want to
next
say I'm
question
going to
now.
override Martin a minute. Very short. Joe Strummer sang in The Clash, "The truth is only known by gutter snipes." Don't forget where real culture comes from. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. So we've got another Robert in the room. Hopefully, Robert Knowles-Leake. Can you raise your hand, please, Robert? There you are.
Hello? Yes, you can hear me. So my question is, recent times have seen a rise of populist politicians using social media and other new technologies as powerful tools to stoke anger and push polarization within our communities? To what extent should these tools and techniques be used or controlled in political engagement?
Robert, I cut you off rudely. I'm going to let you answer that one
That's
first,
very
please.
kind. Let's just kick off. There's a huge amount of censorship online. There should be no censorship online. Tim Berners-Lee, the British man that invented the World Wide Web, he said information should be free. And that's exactly the way it should be. If the governments now, we're talking about the globalist aspects of government, they don't think for themselves. It's from global to local, bypasses Westminster. So we have Mrs. Debbonaire here talking about the great things that are going to happen when Labour get into power. They are going to accelerate the globalist campaign, and they will be trying to lock people down. They'll be trying to control you. Mark my words, when it comes to information, and this I did mention earlier about divide and rule, a lot of divide and rule stuff comes from the top down. It is separating us. And that also includes the trans thing. You know, it's 0.2% of the population and 100% division. So where I'm coming from, what we all need to talk about is this country and community coming together as one nation, which we can obviously be proud of. So to answer this person's question, the information should be free. That's where freedom is at. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech is the absolute cornerstone of democracy, and it's getting a kick in right now. And it's not getting a kick in from people who like to speak freely. It's getting a kick in from the applied behavioral psychology teams and the nudge units. And this is something we have to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Kellie-Jay.
So I started my activism in 2018 by putting up a billboard, which was the dictionary definition of the word woman. And that was removed for hate speech. Since that time, I've been interviewed 3 times by the British police for saying it's wrong to take a child to Thailand and have him castrated at the age of 16, that men can't be women, that children shouldn't be transitioned in any way, shape or form. I've even had the police at my door for being untoward about paedophiles, which was a shock to me because I thought you could be quite untoward about people that want to rape children. Apparently not. I've also been arrested for trying to talk about this issue in the street. And at the same time as my hurty words, which might offend some people by saying things like women don't have penises, at the same time, a man can go in a woman's space and show his penis to your daughters, your mothers, your wives, your sisters, and that's not such a big deal. So when it comes to censorship, I've been banned from Twitter, I've been banned from Mumsnet. These are all places I'm not allowed to sign. I'm not allowed to sign a petition on change.org because I say that women don't have penises and men don't have vaginas, and it's wrong to transition children. So I am very fearful of anybody that wants to restrict the words that we are allowed to say, because the ideas don't go away, they will just keep going. And the more pernicious an idea, the more I think it needs airing in public so that we are free to disagree with it and change people's minds.
Samuel, please.
Thank you, Robert. It concerns me, the idea of too much regulation to limit free speech. That does concern me. However, online, I think, is a really different space. I think it's been really interesting and, again, quite concerning how many clear bots have been used to stimulate false sense of support, particularly from reform through TikTok. This is worrying, actually. And what's worrying for me is a sense of inflating false narratives. And there is an element of ensuring safety. That's absolutely true. And that's why the online safety bill is so important, to ensure that people are kept safe online. But it's also really important that we're able to encourage free speech. And so I do believe there is an element of regulation that is important, held to account, And for me, this is really about a responsible and accountable private sector. I'm happy for these to be private companies, but there clearly does need to be sensible regulation that doesn't limit business, but does safeguard safeguard free speech as well as the most vulnerable in particular.
Thangam Debbonaire.
Well, Robert, thank you, because this is an election year. There are elections across the world, from democracies to countries that are less than democratic. And freedom to express yourself and freedom for journalists to scrutinise the powerful is so important. But misinformation and disinformation is unfortunately rife. We know that there are instruments of misinformation that are putting out deceitful and misleading things that will influence the way people vote. Now, what goes on in the offline world, I'm afraid to say, also influences the online world and vice versa. So recently I was very disappointed, in fact, to see some election material here in Bristol Central that said something about the Labour Party that is categorically untrue. And I'm going to take this opportunity to correct it because it's since come out on the online world and has then had an effect in the real world. Saying that Labour has a plan to privatise the NHS is simply a lie.
What about public-private partnership? What about stakeholders?
And I think that dishonesty in politics is not something we do in Bristol. I think it's really unfortunate that any politician would choose to spread such misinformation because it's frightening for those people who want to use the NHS, who rely on the NHS. Now, that matters because it then gets spread online like wildfire. Now, I think the answer here is for us to behave more respectfully in our political discourse. We can disagree, we can be passionate, we can fervently hold different views. But spreading misinformation like that hurts only those people who are most affected. I've got a broad pair of shoulders. I can take stuff being said about me. It'll be said about me again tomorrow. But I can't take the fact that some people would choose to spread that sort of misinformation, seemingly unaware, but surely aware of the fact it will be then further spread online and then multiplied in the real world. It has a real world consequence. I think the democracy is much too precious to do that. And I have never done that in my campaigning. So I appreciate your question, Robert, because whether it's online or offline, the threat to our democracy from mis- and disinformation and downright lies is rife. And we all here on this stage, should be setting a better example.
Carla, please.
Thank you. So I think the comments that have just been made are a reference to something that was in a couple of our leaflets. But if I'm honest, I don't really understand how they can be backed up, because Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary himself, said that he would, quote, hold the door open to an increased role for the private sector in the NHS.
That's not privatisation, Carla. That's not privatisation.
Well, it is an increased role for private companies in a publicly owned health service. I think most people would consider that a step towards privatisation. What's more, we only have to look back to the last Labour government to see all of the PFI deals that the Labour government signed the NHS up to, which has left hospitals still absolutely hamstrung by debt from making those repayments. I was down on the junior doctor picket lines this week, where junior doctors were raising the PFI deals as a reason why they were seeing their hospitals being underfunded, underinvested, because of those previous steps led by a Labour government in towards privatisation.
What have you done? Yeah. Public-private partnership. Stakeholders.
Okay, we'll let Nicholas.
I'm happy to answer the question.
Let's let Nicholas answer his question first, and then.
Okay. Thank you. I will address Robert's question, although I don't think that we need to go round the chairs again to hear more. Now, the issues was about populism and social media. And social media is a symptom, but I want to look at the structural stuff at the beginning. Well, no one's ever accused the Liberal Democrats of being populist, but how does this system work? It's about people feeling like they're left out of a system, and that comes in two ways. It's about inequality, which we've talked about before, but there is the case that our majoritarian political system locks out views and makes people feel that they have not been heard. And so we want to have two big structural reforms to our politics. One is to cap big money donations to political parties, and another one is to do a proportional representation through single transferable vote to the House of Commons and indeed to local authorities, so that views are represented in our mainstream politics, and we don't need an extremist view coming in from the outside saying, well, what about me? You've shut me out of the conversation. Then looking at how social media companies work, it's not just about politics, there's also various harms across the spectrum of making people feel like they don't fit in. And so I think the social media tax, the digital services tax company, which currently works on social media companies and others, is currently at 2%. We would raise that up to 6% so that we can fund dedicated mental health professionals in every school to really tackle the problems that our children face from overexposure to social media and the damaging things that they see there.
Can we give the mic back to the questioner, please, Karen? I think he had something else to say to those responses.
My shouting out, I apologise for that, because I was really hoping that Carla would actually answer the question rather than talking about the NHS for most of the time.
I'm happy to.
I would happily cede this time back to address the question, which was the use of polarising techniques and stoking anger in communities as a legitimate or not form of political engagement.
Carla, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, absolutely. As a woman in politics, I'm all too aware of the impacts of division on social media and in the real world, and the risks that can be exacerbated by social media algorithms especially. And social media companies absolutely need to take a greater role in this. They need to be held account for the content that is posted on their platforms and the impact of the algorithms that tends to further entrench division in online discussion. So there is absolutely a case which I support for stronger regulation online. We also, as the Green Party, support better regulation of political campaigning generally, including, in common with the Lib Dems, in fact, better regulation of campaign donations, of spending, and of making sure that messaging is accurate. And I have, on behalf of the Green Party, signed the Reform Political Advertising Pledge, which is all about ensuring honesty in political campaigning. And that's a priority and something that we in my local campaign here and nationally always try and ensure that everything that we put out is honest and fair. And I've signed that on behalf of the whole Green Party, which, as far as I know, the Labour Party hasn't yet. I'll finish by saying that as a local campaigner as well as a national politician, one of the most heartwarming aspects of campaigning is speaking to people on the doorstep and realising that far from the sense of division and anti-politics feeling that we sometimes get online and from mainstream media as well, actually the vast majority of people I speak to on the doorstep are somewhere on the spectrum between delighted or at least sort of neutral about the fact that we've turned up on their doorstep. They're often grateful that we're there to hear the issues that matter to them. And it really helps to restore faith in humanity that people want to see politicians out listening to them, working for them, and it's great to hear how much we all have in common.
Thank you, candidate. So I think we've got time for one more question. This is a question from Holly Loach from Cotton. So, can you justify the selling of arms or their parts to Israel when we can all see the grotesque cruelty in the way they are being used against the Palestinians? So that's a... I'm going to start with Samuel Williams, please.
Thank you, Holly, for your question. I think we can all, we've all seen the images. I work in international development. I've spent time in horrifying circumstances, and I think we can all see the horrifying images that we've seen playing out on our television screens and the newspapers. We recognise that international relations are complex, and it is within Israel's right to protect themselves. However, that needs to be proportionate. And I'm deeply concerned by what we see playing out currently in the Middle East. And I personally struggle to justify the sale of arms, that especially if we know they are being sold and traded in a particular way. And of course, that's really not an official answer, is it? It's a personal answer, because it's a deeply personal and heartbreaking situation. So I hope you will afford me some generosity and graciousness, maybe, in my answer.
Thangam Debbonaire.
What we've seen since October the 7th has been truly horrifying. From the way hostages were taken by Hamas, separated from their families, to the brutal slaughter of thousands of women, men and children. I don't want to see that happen. Nobody here wants to see that happen. And we have strong laws in this country about the trading rules for selling arms to different countries around the world. The Labour Party has asked the Conservative government, because we believe in the rule of law, the Labour Party brought in that law. We want to see the legal advice that has been given to them. Now, they haven't done that, but if we win the election on Thursday, we'll be able to see that advice on Friday. And if it has been found to break the law, which we don't know until we see that advice, we will act. Keir Starmer has already called for no British arms to be used in the invasion of Rafah. We called months ago for a sustainable ceasefire to lead to a peace process. Now, our motion, Labour's motion, passed months ago, calling for an immediate ceasefire, return of hostages, aid into Gaza, and a return to the peace process. And that is in our manifesto. But you know what? Netanyahu and Hamas, they're not following motions in Parliament. In order to protect Palestinian people, to stop this being used as a political football with reference to motions, I'm interested in a path to peace, for safety and justice for the Palestinian people who've suffered so much, for a return of the hostages to their families, and for Israel and Palestine to be able to live side by side in safety and security. Now, I wish the world was simple, but it's not. And preparing for government, for Keir Starmer and our shadow International Development Secretary and our shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy, they have been working so hard behind the scenes to make sure we can take our place on the world stage, to get that peace process back up and running. It won't be down to us, but we can play that supporting role. And that's what I care about, because I care more about Palestinian life than I do about being criticised for not voting for one motion, but voting for another. We voted for a ceasefire. I voted for it before, I'll vote for it again, but I'm more interested in getting us on the path to peace, getting rid of weapons if they've been illegally sold, and we'll find that out on Friday if we're in government, than in any other criticism whether or not I signed a particular motion, which I'm bound to get this evening. That's a good example of some of the misinformation that's been spread, not just about me, but about the Labour Party. And I'm happy to clear that up. The Labour Party voted, the Labour Party voted a decade ago to recognise the state of Palestine. It is in our manifesto, as is getting back to a peace process. I have voted for a ceasefire. I voted for a ceasefire, and I have voted for... Are you going to do something about this?
Can we just let the candidates answer the questions, if possible, please? Okay, Thangam, sorry about that.
I have voted for a ceasefire, which I'm sure everybody in this room really knows. But I want more than a ceasefire. It's no good talking about permanent ceasefire. We need a path to a peace process, so a sustainable two-state solution, which the Labour Party has put in our manifesto. And if we're elected on Thursday as a government, we will deal with this complex world. We will play our part in that peace process, which is what we need. That's what comes after a ceasefire. It's a peace process and a lasting solution.
So just to move things on, we just need to give candidates the respect, I think, that we need to give them so they can answer the questions. So, Carla, please.
Thank you for the question, Holly. Whenever I look at the news coming out of the Middle East, I feel sick. Like you, I see the human cost of this conflict is so great and the repercussions echo around the world. From the start, the Green Party condemned, of course, the horrific Hamas attacks on the 7th of October, targeting innocent people and breaking international law. And we were clear that Israel has the right to defend itself from those attacks, of course. But the actions of the Israeli government have gone far, far beyond self-defense. I'm sure that everyone in this room and watching online is appalled that British companies are selling arms to Israel, which are then being used on innocent Palestinians, including many women and children. It is criminal, and the UK government is complicit. It is never okay to sell weapons to any country that is illegally occupying another. This suspending arms sales to Israel is something that the Green Party has been consistently calling for over 2 decades, and my party is clear, it must stop now.
Nicholas Coombes.
Thank you. It is awful. The hostages, the invasion, the occupation, and us making political points about it doesn't make it any better. The Liberal Democrats were the first to call for a ceasefire of the UK political parties. Well, does that really make much of a difference? What needs to happen is that the Hamas need to release the hostages. Israeli civil society need a leadership that are willing to compromise. Now, from our end, our policy is that we want a bilateral ceasefire between the two parties, get the hostages out, get the aid in, and build space to work towards a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders. And what can we do as the UK there? Now, we would, as Liberal Democrats, if we were in government, want to control arms exports to countries with poor human rights records. But really, the pressure that we can exert is less than the pressure that the US can exert. President Biden has a plan for a compromise there that I think I would back, and I think a lot of people will. But until we get movement in the leadership of Hamas, in either the Israeli government or Israeli political society, us shouting about it on a stage in Bristol just feels a bit hollow to me.
Kellie-Jay, please.
I find it an interesting question that I'm supposed to condemn some arms sales, but apparently some are okay. It seems a bit distasteful. So I'm just going to say, as a single-issue party that focuses on women, starting here in the UK and then throughout the rest of the world, I can't quite honestly try and gain any political capital by answering the question, and so I'll duck out. Thank you.
Robert Clarke.
Thank you. Well, when it comes to the gun, there's a bullet for every one. So this question, think about that. When it comes to the gun, there's a bullet for every one, all right? And so you're talking about arms, and you are talking about Israel and Gaza, and it looks like they're trying to wipe Gaza off the map, and it's almost like a pre-planned operation because there's nobody helping the Muslim people there. All the Muslim nations around are doing nothing. They're not taking in any refugees. That's one point. The second point is we need to broaden this perspective. Why do we have all these weapons in the first place? We are sending a lot of weapons, along with so-called Western allies, to the Ukraine. We are shelling the hell out of the Russians, and they're giving us a kicking, or Ukraine a kicking back. A lot of our specialists over there training the Ukrainian soldiers and the Azov brigades and so on. NATO is pushing, this has come up. We're going to be headed for a third world war. I think you need to extend this line of thought. And something that nobody is thinking about or talking about is the genocide in Armenia. And that has been going on for the last 4 years in the area of Nagorno-Karabakh. So it's, of course, Gaza should be spoken about, but it's very specific. There are other areas in the world that have genocides taking place. So just to round this up within the time frame I've got, look at the weapons being sold and look at what is happening. And if a Labour government gets in with Starmer, with Blair behind the throne, Trilateral Commission, the Blair Globalist Foundation, the Globalist for Change Foundation, whatever it's called, they will be accelerating our track towards sending our own kids, or European kids, to fight in the Ukraine. So chew on that for a little while.
Thank you, Robert Clarke. So we're approaching the conclusion of the evening. Earlier tonight, the candidates on stage with me drew lots for the order that they will deliver their closing addresses. So, like the opening address, this has a maximum time, please, candidates, of 2 minutes. So, Carla drew lot number 1.
Thank you. I want to finish by reflecting on the choice you have on the 4th of July. It's more than just a choice between parties or candidates. It's about shaping the future that we want to see. Labour are coming into government, and I think most of us in this room will be relieved to see the back of the Conservatives. But relief isn't enough. We deserve real hope and real change in this country and in Bristol. A government without bold, ambitious direction cannot deliver the real change that we need. We need a far more ambitious, forward-thinking approach to how to solve the biggest challenges in the UK, from housing to healthcare, from education to the environment. The choice you have is not just about who will lead, but how will they lead? Does Starmer's party have the courage to deliver real change, or will they just offer more of the same? Without strong, progressive voices, without MPs who dare to stand up and demand more ambitious, progressive, inclusive policies, and not being afraid to talk about the fact that that means investing more, will we get that? I will champion for the things you care about. Serious action on climate change, standing up for our NHS, making the lives of the many better by asking a little bit more of the privileged few. You can choose to lead, not follow, Bristol. You can choose a future where your voice, your values are represented in Parliament. You can choose to have an MP who can fight independently for you without their hands tied by the Labour Leadership Office. On the 4th of July, you can choose not just who will be in government, but how they govern. Vote Green on the 4th of July for real hope and real change.
Thank you, Carla. Kellie-Jay.
So I'm sitting on a stage with some parties that have bullied women out of their parties. The Green Party have spent tens of thousands of pounds defending itself with calls of bullying its members for saying that a woman is an adult human female. The Labour Party, there's a hashtag called Labour Losing Women because they have failed to stand up for women's single-sex spaces. Thangam herself has been very, very quiet on single-sex spaces and what that actually means to women and why it's important. Her colleague Rosie Duffield has been horrendously bullied by the Labour Party and everybody's been silent. Apparently it's not really happened at all. The Conservative Party, and also Thangam's very proud of introducing the GRA which is a legal fiction which enables men to go into women-only spaces, including in Darlington, where there are nurses taking the NHS to court because there is a man in their changing room, and when they complained, they were told to be quiet and go away and educate themselves. Liberal Democrats, absolutely no better at all. A woman wore an adult human female T-shirt to one of their meetings, and she was kicked out of the party. She's also taking legal action against them. This is what's happening to women in politics right across the board. Now, the Conservatives, they've done all right by the women in their party. In fact, they're pretty great to women in their party. They even allow them to be leaders. However, they have overseen this country over the last decade, introducing this nonsense into schools where children have to call men and women, teaching them by whatever pronoun those men and women say, and those men are allowed in female-only spaces in schools. In fact, the girl guides in this country, you can have a man who calls himself a woman going away with your little 8-year-old girls on a trip, and you won't even be told that he's a man. So this is what we've seen in this country. This is why I decided to stand and disrupt, because no woman has a penis, no man has a vagina, there is no such thing as non-binary, and transitioning children is profound abuse.
What do you think of it so far? Very good.
Thangam Debbonaire.
So on Thursday, we have the chance to be part of a change. We have the chance to vote for bold climate action by creating Great British Energy, a new publicly owned energy company that will help us to double onshore wind, triple solar, quadruple offshore wind, invest in tidal and wave and green hydrogen. These are some of the cheapest forms of energy we have. They will protect our energy security and they'll help save the planet. You have the chance to vote to re-elect an MP who will be at the heart of that government. And we don't just take orders from on high. Some of you may know the Labour Party. We're well known for being able to debate, for disagreement, and then coming together and voting as a team. That's what we do. I've been able to represent you in shadow cabinet, and if I am re-elected, I'll be able to take your voice directly to the heart of cabinet. As Culture, Media and Sports Secretary, I'd be doing something that really matters to Bristol. But Bristol really matters to me. Under the last Labour government, my nephews and nieces, people who are really special to me, they were able to stay on at school and do well at university or college or apprenticeships because of that Labour government, bringing in the education maintenance allowance, child tax credits that allowed their mum to work and allowed them to stay on education. Children across Bristol benefited from that. Now, the next generation of children will benefit from our free breakfast clubs, from increasing the number of nurseries, 3,000 more nurseries across the country, by putting in place mental health support in every school. That's what I want for our young people. I want to be part of that change. I want you to be part of that change. And I hope that on Thursday, if you re-elect me as your MP, you'll be proud to have an MP that's heart of the Labour government if we elect a Labour government across the country. Be part of the change. Vote Labour on Thursday and be part of the change.
Thank you, Thangam. Nicholas.
Thanks. Well, it's been quite an odd experience up here for the last hour and a half. Not just because I don't have a table or a drink, but it's been a rather ill-tempered debate, and not necessarily on the issues that I was expecting. We did have defence pop up just at the end there, and I'd say that the Lib Dems are in favour of building up our armed forces, remaining in NATO and supporting the Ukraine in the fight against Russia. I think I'm possibly standing for the only party that's been consistently in favour of being a member of both NATO and the European Union. So if you want to know what makes the Lib Dems different, that's our overlap. We've talked a bit about representation in the media, and I think it's great that lesbian, gay, bi, and indeed trans people are starting to tell their stories on TV, in film, in our wider culture, because these are not only really good stories, but it's the kind of thing that I would have wanted to see as a gay teenager. We've asked... Now, we've been asked who is a woman, and I've just told you I'm gay. I'm the worst person to define who a woman is. And that's why I don't want rules to say who's a woman, who's a man. If I want to know someone's gender, I'll ask them and I'll trust them. Now, why this matters is because many women are terrified about violence against women and girls. And that is awful. That's the thing that we need to tackle, is to invest by people who are violent against women and girls, who could be anyone. And so we need to invest in dealing with rape and with women's refuse crisis centres, and implement the Istanbul Protocol on violence against women and girls, so that it doesn't actually matter what gender you are. Now, some of the things that we haven't actually talked about very much, I was surprised, is health. And so I opened talking about our proposal for a guarantee to see a doctor for an urgent appointment within a day, to get your cancer from diagnosis to treatment within 2 months, and also renewables. I mentioned that I'm a wind farm developer, and we want to push to 90% renewable production for UK energy by 2030. That works for me and my job, but I think it also works for the entire country for cheaper, locally produced, reliable energy. And we haven't really talked about education either. The Lib Dems want to start increasing funding above the level of inflation for schools per pupil, so that we can catch up with what we've missed out on over the last years of inflation. To sum up, Liberal Democrat values, I think, are the same as Bristol values, and we need political reform so that people in Bristol have got a free choice to vote with your conscience and not just work out the best tactical vote for this situation.
Thank you, Nicholas. And Samuel, please.
I think what Nicholas has just demonstrated, sort of an affable integrity, is the very thing that we need more of in politics. Absolutely. Because we do need a change, don't we? I mean, that's absolutely true. Thangam's absolutely right. We do need a change. Here in Bristol Central, that's not more of Labour. We've had Labour for years in Bristol. Thangam's mentioned the scaling up of Great British Energy Company. Well, we've seen that in Bristol, haven't we? Bristol Energy, it lost the taxpayer almost £50 million, and they want to scale that up to national. I'm not that convinced or confident in that. Is that the type of change we want to see here in Bristol Central? More waste, more vanity projects scaled up to national level? I'm not sure. And the truth is, I wanted to champion Carla and the Green Party, but I feel like they are little more than the trick my daughter plays on me each morning with a boiled egg, where she eats out the middle, turns it over, and then says, "Here, Dad, have a go." It's a shell with no substance. And we need politicians who can deliver substance. So vote Conservative.
Samuel, thank you very much. And finally, Robert Clarke, please.
So it's very good that I am going to be able to speak to you last, because you'll remember this. The architecture of fascism is being built up around us, with the COVID debacle being the opening gambit from forces that wish to control us. Public-private partnership, stakeholder society. This is de facto corporate fascism as defined by Mussolini himself. Bristol has a role in making sure this non-freedom does not happen. There is no room for intolerance. Recognize the divide and rule agenda. Reject these control mechanisms being enforced by applied behavioral psychology and nudge units. Build up your parallel societies. Democracy means the people rule, and we need to make sure our public servants know that. Democracy and freedom are our birthright. On no account give your freedoms up to fabricated notional diktats prescribed to control us. Establish freedom, live it, and pass those ancient freedoms on to your children and your children's children, and teach them how to be free. It was a sad disgrace to see the people mask up, lock down, and toe the line during the bogus COVID era. Finally, listen to this, let's not be fooled again.
Robert Clarke, thank you very much. So, democracy, ladies and gentlemen. So there concludes this evening. Thank you so much to everybody in the audience, both here in the Lantern Hall and on the live stream. Thank you to all of the candidates. Thank you to everyone at the Bristol Beacon, everyone at Bristol 24/7, our live captioners. Please become a member of Bristol 24/7 if you are not already, and remember to vote on Thursday. I've been Martin Booth. Good night.
Thank you.